Alrighty, welcome back. We are here with Dr. Jess Rowan Marcotte again for our workshop on meaningful mechanics for misfits. And I will hand it over to you.
Thank you. So today you'll be working with and speaking with the other workshop participants at your table or in the same breakout rooms for folks online. So please be mindful of each other and share the speaking time equitably if you can throughout the workshop. It's okay not to speak if you don't want to, but please do check in with each other to make space for everyone to speak. So what do you think about when you think about video games? What do you picture? Maybe something like this, like scores and, you know, guns, leveling up, stuff like that. Maybe you picture this kind of protagonist, usually some kind of anti-hero, lone wolf, cold and aloof, white. Kids really love 30-something brown-haired white males. But then there's all this other stuff. So this is just like a random part of itch.io's front page. So that's a place where anyone can put up games. There's lots of people that just put them up for free. These happen to be paid. So note the variety of art styles and subjects, from a game about picking mushrooms with your grandma to a sci-fi mystery that takes place as part of a time loop. Or even further, these games, which use completely different kinds of input devices that are kind of like skirting the line between video games and like something else, like installations or some kind of hybrid form. So these are usually known as alternative controller games. So my point is that games can look like a lot of things and communicate many different kinds of experiences to players. This is a medium that has like a lot more going on than guns and points and leveling up. It's not all levels. It's not all being powerful and toting guns, though it might seem that way. And the point of this workshop is, yeah, if you're making artwork of any kind, so I pictured performers in mind, knowing a bit about the audience, but if you want to make something that an audience is going to interact with, participate in, or do something during, then you can learn about how game designers do it. Sure thing. I'll continue speaking anyway, because I know we're a bit behind on time. But yeah, we have to move beyond that surface level of leveling up and points and like that like stereotype of games that we have going on. So that's what we're going to do. Understanding that big asterisk that we have limited time together, and this is a practice like any other art practice, meaning that it's something you have to look at. But my goal for today is really to start you off with some basics and get you curious about what people are doing in this space and what you might be able to do with your own artwork and performances. So a few quick useful definitions. What's procedural rhetoric? It is a fancy way of saying that rules or procedures and systems have embedded meaning, values, and arguments inside them. So this is a pretty handy way of talking about game systems, but importantly, it also applies to systems of privilege and oppression and pretty well any other system that you can think of. So how we design a system reveals who it's meant to benefit, what values the creators had in mind. Of course, that can be satirical and fictional, but satire that can't be read as satire isn't doing its job very well. So that's something to bear in mind. And what is a game mechanic? So game mechanics are the actions that a player can take in a game and the rules in the system that govern how the system responds to that action. So whether those rules and those responses come from code, from other players, or from facilitators like performers. Basically, a game mechanic is a possible action that's in a context with rules. So I asked you to come ready with an idea for a piece for audience involvement today, and today we're going to talk about how the audience is involved and what they do. We'll come up with a mechanic or two that you might decide to use, and we'll also examine potential pitfalls. So we have some online participants. So I'm gonna check in with the people that are handling the stream. And in between exercises, I will share pictures of my cats so that we can wait for everyone to be back from the breakout rooms before I continue on. So over on the left, we've got Guybrush, who I found on the street the night before a frost. And he wasn't meant to be my cat, but then it turned out that he was actually meant to be my cat. And Guybrush is so energetic that we were just like, we need a cat that can keep up with him. And Cecil turned out to be the perfect one. So first exercise that we're going to do is just get each other on the same page about what idea you came with. So this is going to be very, very short, like 45 seconds or less, really the elevator pitch. It could be something that's really brand new. It could be something that you're just starting to work on, or it could be something that is established and you want to add something interactive or that a game mechanic that the audience or the players or however you frame that for yourself can do together. So you might want to mention things like what medium you work in, what your ideal audience size is, the ideal cast size, maybe some technologies you want to use, for example, headphones, or what stage of development it's at, all that sort of stuff. And we'll do that for 3 minutes and then a minute at the end to come back from the breakout rooms. And I will set a timer starting now. And it's okay if you don't have an idea, just say what you want for 3 minutes, and maybe that will be your new game or your new performance. Please go ahead. And I will also walk among you a little bit to listen. So yeah, it's a lot. I'm sorry. Thank you. Alrighty, so we're gonna close the breakout rooms. Here's a picture of Cecil. Two pictures, same content. And if everyone is back from the breakout rooms early, just let me know. Cool, cool. Okay, so everyone is back from breakout rooms. Let's talk about meaningful verbs and context. So now our next goal, now that you know a bit about each other's pieces, is to choose actions for players and audience members that either have metaphorical or literal meaning in the context of the piece. And a bonus goal is for this to be a verb or an action that's compelling and repeatable. Fun is a lot less important than feels interesting to do. So yeah, ideally it would be compelling to perform, but sometimes you want an action that's unpleasant if that's meaningful to you. So something to bear in mind. So what do I mean here by these meaningful verbs and contexts? If you listen to my previous talk, I talked about sneaking. So in Traces, players had to sneak around and try to act normal as they collected stories about trans people. And the act of being stealthy as a secret operative in the context of trans stories had a double meaning. And simultaneously, in act normal, the verb was act normal. By asking people to act normal, I ensured that they absolutely wouldn't. So players really ran with this assignment and they made it their own. Some even brought homemade props. And it turned out that spoofing 2019 was really, really compelling to them. So I asked them to come be typical people from 2019 to animate the space. Here is my dear friend Squinky in the role of a tech row CEO for Uber, which is Uber for toilets. In another piece called This Is Fine, players are invited to network for a job during a literal apocalypse. And the main rule is to never acknowledge the apocalypse, for that would be polite. So the main verb is trying to deny while things are falling apart around you. You know, we made it in 2019. We didn't think that it would become prophetic. But yeah, this added a meta layer onto all the conversations and actions in the piece. So things are going awry with floods and flame and gas, the loss of Wi-Fi. And players can't acknowledge what's going on to them due to the rules of networking etiquette. And this is a photo from a Zoom version of the game. So, and here's an example of meaning through repeated actions. So repeated actions can help us simulate things in games like tiredness and difficulty by actually making us physically tired, like actually having to press that button repeatedly. Here's an example from a game called Quap. Players control an Olympic runner's thighs and calves. You know, it's actually super difficult to practice an Olympic sport, but this is an absurd version where you're controlling the individual like muscles in the legs to mimic how challenging it is. And so I am really, really sorry that I missed Lisa's talk this morning. But just something to bear in mind, I'm sure that you've heard a lot of amazing things from her about this. But as you think through these verbs, think about the different modes and senses you're engaging with in these actions that you're asking participants to take. Are you requiring something that needs certain motor skills? Do participants have to physically exert themselves? Does the action have to use two hands? Does the action have to happen fast? Is it in an enclosed space? Do participants have to be able to see? Do they have to have good low light vision? Do they need to be able to distinguish colors? Are there strobing lights? Do they need to follow a sound cues? Are there very loud sounds? Are you able to combine sound and visual cues? Are there scents involved in your piece? And can you run some form of scent-free version? So basically, I'm front-loading this because accessibility should never be an afterthought. So as you make these choices about what actions you want participants to take, there are a lot of different questions to be asking. So flagging your performance or game with the choices that you've made to make them accessible alongside who they're accessible for is very important, because universal accessibility is like not really a thing. Like those choices like will exclude or include different audiences. So something to bear in mind as you go through these exercises. So you can flag your work. Like I said, here are some example categories from theater. So relaxed performances are typically for families, people with sensory needs, people who might need to make noise or move around. There's mutually accessible performances for deaf and hearing audiences, audio described performance, physically accessible by wheelchair performances. These are all, I think, from the British Council source, because I knew where I was coming. And then another factor is approachability, right? So like, this is about who the experience is welcoming to, whether it welcomes new participants well or people who haven't yet done what you're asking of them. How easy is it for them to try? Does it require a lot of skill? Is their participation likely to embarrass them or ask them to put themselves out there in an uncomfortable way? Those are very important considerations too. Probably, yeah, all very important considerations. I am not going to rank them because that is a trap. And then agency. So this is about how much the participants' actions impact the end result of your experience. It is very scary to give up control of a performance to an audience in some ways, right? But also it can be extremely impactful and meaningful. So do their actions have the ability to meaningfully impact the outcome of the experience? That is a choice, and it can fully depend on what kind of piece you're making and what you are trying to communicate with it. Do they affect the experience for other participants? And are you willing to deal with the repercussions of that? It's another important consideration. Which brings us to our second exercise. I want you to make a 3x3 grid of boxes big enough to write a phrase in. You'll very, very quickly come up with 9 active verbs that you like in relation to the creative piece that you're working on. And then you'll choose 3 of those that you think have legs or that you think you want to develop further with the context and rules, and briefly describe what would be happening in the show while the participant is taking that action. So the context for it. And I will also walk around during this. For now, let your imagination run wild. Keep sort of what we've briefly discussed about meaningful mechanics in mind: accessibility, approachability, agency. But the main goal is to generate ideas right now. So spend 1 minute per box and then refine 3 at the end. I can do a minute timer, but I don't know if that would be, is that something that people want? Okay, so I will do a minute timer. All right, so breakout rooms, please. And oh, sorry, no, yes, we don't need breakout rooms for this solo. Very good. So yeah, I will do a timer. I'll give you some time before I come and poke my head out. Okay, so that's the end of minute 1. And if folks that are on Zoom want to like share what they're working on in the chat, if they feel comfortable, I would love to see it or hear about what they're doing too. Thank you. So that is the end of the second minute. End of the third. End of the fourth. So that's the end of the fifth. So you should be roughly on your fifth box. Well, having finished your fifth box. End of the sixth. end of the 7th. So that's the end of the 8th. So you have 1 more minute to fill your last box. And then we'll move on to developing those further, and I'll walk around and we can chat and alrighty, so I'm going to do a 5-minute timer now. And I will also come walk around, and I want to see what kind of things y'all are up to. Yeah, well, not in the chat. More about the generation. Maybe it's the audience has to figure out what it means to offend. Yeah.
Recalling and refusing, kind of, or is this for, this for engaged around like sympathy and cues and like walking in someone's shoes and standing for but it can be an actual sensation. Making sense of that experience is not something we can oh now and it's the woman walking with my
So that was our 5 minutes for that. I think probably nobody has to come back. So here's a bonus picture of Guybrush. Discombobulate it. So our next exercise is about accessibility. So whether you wound up expanding one action or 3, the goal now is to share with the table at your people and with the people at your table and discuss what kinds of access needs do these verbs meet and what kinds of access needs will they not work for. Are there adaptations that you could make to that action to make them more accessible to people, to more people? Will performing these actions repeatedly be taxing or tiring? Are they fun, which is not a word I love to use, but shorthand, or meaningful to repeat? So now it's like you have a test group, focus group of 3 people. What do you foresee about these verbs and the needs that they'll create or meet? So that is the goal. 4 minutes per person this time. But if you're not finished quite with your other discussion, it's up to you how you use the time, of course. But I will mark the time with a 4-minute timer so everyone gets the chance to talk about their work.
Okay,
So mine mine's actually much very easy there, so that's why I was so much didn't want to, because I don't want to have it so much about and so it's pretty I feel like I can see and my verbs on float was on to experience of flow time, that it's necessary.
I would say for this one, you just did it essentially attracts more traffic. Like, it's just like everything is right now. I was thinking about like this. I would say like I would
Well, yeah. Oh my God, you must be like, it's up on the railway, it's crazy. Yeah, so it's really way of being. Yeah, I don't know, I'm actually not like explain something.
It's like, well,
In terms of the word,
you're an adventurer.
Being still. And absorbing. Experiencing weightlessness and something. And thinking that it will be challenging and actually. So. I'm thinking in terms of accessibility, I'm not sure I definitely. I don't think that it's just going to, this work will just be very simple for.
Are there specific things that you are concerned about with access or accessibility?
Yeah, like the pace that we look for that and is that.
I mean, it's cool. So that was the first one, the next one to another question.
So it's how can the work be like much more. And so I think it will just be really probably more than one version, someone like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always a confident moment where like players or clients make an expect. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, actually, I have an experience with
So now it's the last 4 minutes.
Yeah, great. Just
Yeah.
I know.
It's a really positive balance. And if the proposition is for, certain type of sentence, yeah.
Because normally we walk past as women in the city to like get out, get home safely. Right, and that's right, it's put on photos and get to home. You know, it's like, I know where I'm going, don't attack me. You know, so it's a kind of speed to it. Raise your knuckles. Yes. I need to
12 minutes in group. Cats, more cats. I can also like come girl from Ipanema if anybody wants, but I don't think I'm gonna She sure is, yeah. And a little rain jacket. That's actually in BC. Yes, yeah, yeah. They're the break room's cats too, because that way people in the break room don't miss anything. Oh, she looks sexy. Oh, I love it. Amazing. Okay, so from here on out, the goal is to refine and test. So keeping in mind what we talked about at the beginning, how much agency do you want players to have? Will they be able to change your work through the mechanics? Are your metaphors metaphorizing? Would a literal approach work better? What accessible alternatives can you provide? This is a good time to like try things out. So that can look like anything that you want. It could be more talking. It could be like physically exploring the actions in the space. Anything that you want pretty well. And that's sort of where we'll leave things for the workshop, because that'll be the rest of our time is this working time. Any questions that you have, discussion, things about what I said, and refining the mechanics. So I'm here for you, you're here for each other, I hope. And we'll use this time to like anything but anything and the kitchen sink sort of time. And I think we'll do that for like maybe 10 minutes, just because I don't want to run us too far past the time that we were supposed to end. But yeah, I am here. I will also walk around. If there are break room questions, I will also be here for that. And yeah, it's the time to try and put it all together and figure stuff out. Is there anybody who wants me to test a verb for them? Oh, question. Yeah, I asked them to share with me too, but I guess they were shy. But now that they have to share with everyone, I think it would probably be
Hello, breakout room.
all the way down. Okay.
Okay, so you won't be able to hear Jess for a second, but the group here would really love to know what you've been doing in your breakout room. So if you guys are okay with popping on video and sharing with us, we would love that. Also, you can say, no way, Melissa, and we will move on in the chat if you would like to not even say no way literally. That's okay.
Yeah, you can totally do that in Zoom. You can search the emojis.
Oh, yes, yes. If you would also like to use your reaction, you can say no with a red X.
A turtle or a thumbs up if you want to do that.
But the folks here would love to hear from you. Yeah, I see they're unmuted. Don, are you speaking?
No. Should I speak?
Hello. Yeah.
Okay, so I did not prepare for the workshop, so I was very like put together. Our group talked about different ways to interact with games through the game controllers, specifically EEG sensors like reading brainwaves, which you can play with without moving your body. But we also talked about the negative aspect of that, which is where is the data sent? So your brainwave data how is that treated by the software that the game is made with. And then that was all we managed to do. Then in the solo work, the main words I used was wonder and wonder, like wonder with like wandering around, and wonder like wandering. And then the third choice was breathing fire. So the game mechanics was basically wandering around, wondering about life and stuff in different, like getting lost a little bit. And then when you were encountering like the opponents, you could breathe fire on them. So instead of letting them burn you, you would actually breathe fire on the enemies, basically. Maybe this was, I don't know if this was counted as a weapon. We were not supposed to work with that, right? I don't know, but I'm working with fire in my performance myself. So that was then this last track. Then I was thinking like repetition. Is this fun to do? Repeat and over again. So I didn't find an answer to the repetition. Like what is motivating? Is there an end goal? Is there a win state? Like I didn't get to those parts.
Hopefully that's loud enough, but not too loud. Anyway, yeah, so that's great. Thank you so much for sharing, Deepen. Yeah, does anybody else want to share what they are thinking about or working on, or like a problem that you're running into that you might like to like get help digging into, something that's like on your mind about your new verbs and actions? It is okay if not. It is like the end of the day, and I am sure that is very tiring. Or also, if you have questions for me about this approach or things that you could do with it in the future, or if you want to be like, hey, Jess, did you share the slides with Melissa and Keddy so that they could share them with us? That is a yes. So, like, I know some folks missed the beginning. All right, and I'll leave some space.
I would just like to say something really quickly. Just I'd be quite interested in my table discussion around this idea of agency, which by the way I don't really believe in as something that has inherent value. However, I have been thinking about how agency can be like what participants choose to do. How subtle can it get and still be called agency somehow? You know, like how subtle can decisions be made to still count as agency? That's all. I just thought that was fun.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes, like with the brainwave things, there are things that look like agency but aren't necessarily, right? Like, which is the other flip side of things, like the theater of it. Like, it seems like a meaningful choice, even though it has no like impact on the outcome of the piece, because we believe that it has meaning. Like the controlling things with like those sensors is like notoriously difficult, because they're very sensitive to the environment and the context around them, and they often just like don't work in any place that's like not very controlled conditions. So like I totally have a piece where it's like, here's this headset, you wear it and you affect the game, and the headsets weren't on. Like, so yeah, but I think agency is a really, really interesting question, like perceived agency too versus actual agency. Yeah. I don't know what that even means. Yeah, for sure.
Like it has no
And like
value whatsoever.
it fully depends on who the participants are. Yeah, like and I guess like consistency is another word that comes up there, because you could run the same experience with like a group of performers and they'll get it. They might have experience doing like what you're asking them to do, and it'll be like, oh, great, like I get this, and like the outcome is really satisfying.
Yeah.
And you might run it with people that have no experience, and it's also great. But then you might run it with a third group, and it's like, it didn't work out so well, right? And like that's like a risk and a consequence, a repercussion, and like it could be beautiful and magical, or it could be really like disappointing, right? Yeah. Yeah, that was a super interesting discussion. Sure, yeah, please.
I was interested about like the agency thing. When you were deciding, I think it's more like do you often think that this kind of impacts may affect not only the game itself, not only the journey or the players? For example, sometimes when I play a game and I feel that I'm shit in this game, like just taking the theme of the sport, for example. So sometimes I don't fit in that game somehow, even though that game is made for me. We are talking about career games and stuff like that. So what happens if a decision that one opponent or player like a team player somehow affects my experience in a bad way?
Yeah, absolutely. Like
Yeah,
it totally can.
We can't predict that, right? So we can't control that, right?
Mhm.
That's life, isn't it? That's just the nature of it.
Yes, yes.
I think framing can help. Like a lot of the times, how you frame a performance or a show or like an interactive experience, people will self-exclude or self-include based on how it's framed and like what it's calling to. So that can be one helpful thing. But like, yeah, like fully, it can turn into a bit of a mess. That's why I think aftercare and like debriefing becomes super, super important, and like safety mechanics. So if someone does something not cool, there's a way to like put the brakes on, right? And be like, hey, let's like retake that last thing, or let's go in a different direction, or let's stop talking about that, like putting it behind a veil, for example. So there's something called the TTRPG safety toolkit that I think is very, very handy, not only for game designers, but also probably for like interactive performance folks and theater folks for sure. That has like a lot of these like questions thought through, like how do you, in a something that's not scripted, how can you help shape the experience for the players? Another thing, if there's the possibility to customize it, if there's that level of customizability, which is a lot of work, right? Is to do like a short period of time where you're like, I absolutely don't want to see this thing in my experience. Like, I don't want to talk about this. I do want to talk about that. I really, really want this to happen. I really don't want this to happen. Almost like kind of like a consent negotiation kind of situation. There are options, but it is a risk. It's always a risk for sure. Yeah. Very good question. So on that note, I would love to chat a bit more if there are any other questions. But I think like for official workshopy time, let's call it there. So we're, you know, while we're still a teensy bit fresh. Thanks.